Hello, everybody. Welcome to Onboarding from a Social Distance. I'm just hoping everybody's here, getting signed up, getting signed in. Just going to give a moment. My name is Deslin Wood. I'm the Chief People Officer here with Thoughtexchange, and I'm going to be sharing some tips and ideas about onboarding from a distance, and also collecting some of your ideas so that we can have an interactive discussion. For those of you who are new to a Thoughtexchange Suddenly Remote series, what happens is that we do run exchanges where we get audience participation so that I'm not speaking out into the void and I get to interact with you, which is, of course, the best part. So without further ado, we're going to actually kick this one off with an exchange. Usually I wait to the end, but I was curious to know, we had a lot of interest in today's session. What are people looking for? So I'm going to run an exchange right away. We're going to just do it for about 5 minutes, and then I can integrate some of your questions throughout the session and hopefully answer them. So if you haven't done a thought exchange before, all you need to do is just get ready to click on a link that's going to be posted in the chat. And another option is to take your phone out and you're going to get a QR code. 3 steps. First step is that you're going to share a thought. Second step is you're going to see thoughts of others pop up. And the third step, and you're going to rate them out of 5 stars. 1 star if you're like, not really, up to 5 stars if you're like, oh my God, I would have written that if I thought of it myself. And then the last stage is when you finish rating, about 10, 15 thoughts, you will find the discover stage, which will show you some of the top thoughts and how they're trending. So I would like to jump in with that right away. So again, if you look in the chat, we'll be posting a link. You can just click on that right from your browser. And if it doesn't work, it's because you might not have updated Zoom. So if you haven't updated Zoom, the link might look like you need to cut and paste it into a tab. I apologize for that. If you have updated Zoom, it'll be a live link. And now if you hold up your phone right now from a camera, so you put your camera on and you just hold it and you look at the QR code, you'll see a little pop-up that comes in and you'll click on it and it'll take you to the exchange. So I'm going to give you a few moments to answer the questions. So what are some of your concerns around remote onboarding? So share a thought or two, give you some time to star some thoughts, and then I'll integrate your thinking and your questions into the content. So if you see what's going on right now in our exchange, the top rated concern is how do you build relationships with teammates and create chemistry? Really important. Completely agree that that's one of the things we're going to be touching on. Warm welcome. So what's the sense of community? How do people feel like they're connecting? I love that as well. Great thought. New employees building relationships with existing teams. Yeah, so how do you get a friend? How do you get remote friends? What's the secret behind doing that? A sense of connection, connecting to people, embedding people into the culture, connection to the team, lack of face-to-face. Yeah, so we see a lot of things about connection and culture, connection and culture. Okay, I've heard you. That's what's on your mind right now is connection and culture. So I'm going to jump back into the content, keeping in mind how important it is for connection and for culture. So what are we covering? Why is onboarding so important? I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm going to do it anyway just for 2 seconds, so don't worry, I won't take a long time. 4 parts of remote onboarding and the impact of getting it right. So why is onboarding so important? Well, people used to talk about first impressions, and what's interesting is I love Malcolm Gladwell's take on it. He calls it thin slicing, which is referring to the ability of our unconscious to find patterns in situations and behavior based on a very narrow slice of experience. So what we used to call a first impression kind of made it feel like your first impression could be wrong, but you're going to hold on to it for a long time. Whereas what thin slicing has shown is that with a very small amount of data, people draw pretty accurate conclusions that in the end are pretty much right. So the fact that somebody has a poor onboarding experience usually means that they're not going to have the best experience in the company. And so the issue of those first moments are so important because the brain is looking for any kind of evidence that I did a good thing or I did a bad thing. And I think we all have had experiences like that. I'm actually going to share one of mine a little later on in the session. So what we did with our last batch of hiring, which we had just did basically between about October and February, is we asked our newbies, what feedback or advice can you share about the virtual onboarding experience so that we know it works and what we can improve? So I was really curious to say to the actual newbies, what is it that you found was impactful in your onboarding as opposed to me drawing my own conclusions? And it really came out in 4 themes. So their answers were really around planning, structure, communication, and inclusion. So I'm going to cover each one of those. So planning. Now, planning is huge when you are remote. Um, I wanted to think about it is that not being ready on your first day is bad enough when you're in the office and you come in and people don't have a desk for you or a computer, or they kind of say, can you sit over here? We're going to get that ready. We just have to order this. This is on back order. And you already kind of feel uncomfortable and useless. If you are in your home and it's your first day and you don't have communication already or the tools you need or the connection to anything, it is so terrible. So you have to over index on that planning and really have an amazing workflow that ensures that everybody knows when the person's being hired and they have all the documentation they need and they have all the equipment they need before they start. You might be like, what do you mean before they start? Who gets stuff before they start? Remote people do. So what happens here is that one of these great things is what we got from our top rated thoughts is having IT provide the required equipment before the start date was a major stress relief. So getting it before. Onboarding info was sent to me a week before my initial day, which helped ease my anxieties about what I needed to expect. And I got new hire advice from my colleagues, which I'm going to talk to you about later. So this was something that blew my mind. It's been a year since I've been at Thoughtexchange, and about a week before I started, maybe 5 days, got this beautiful package in the mail. It had my laptop, and it had my phone, and it had a new hire pack for me with a checklist and everything I had to do. And it was crazy. Like, I felt like it was the best gift you could have given me because they had no concerns on the first day that I wouldn't have a computer, wouldn't be connected. I was able to port my phone and the number before my last day at my past job. And I felt like they must really trust me to send me a laptop and a phone before I started. And you might think, well, that's really against the normal thing that we do inside our organization's security. We can't send something. What if you decide not to take the job? You got to take the leap of faith because this person is going to be onboarded alone in their home. And so this is a huge thing. If you take one thing from this today, I believe you should send the stuff before and have people have their whole first 2 weeks planned out on a checklist with their technology. And this is, I often refer to this pyramid. It's like a Maslow pyramid, but just with more details, which is that people need to feel safe and secure. And it's really hard to feel safe and secure when you don't know what's going to happen on your first day and you're not even going anywhere. You're just waking up in your house. And so having that material and knowing that you're connected and having things work is a huge differentiator that you have to have ready. And so that means that you have to be very proactive. It also might mean that you need to put off a start date. So if you can't get equipment to people or you can't get the tools to them ahead of time, I would not wing it. I would say wait until they have the tools. And invariably, the best solution is to have it to them beforehand. It's a big differentiator for us. Now, the next thing is once I have everything, I'm really curious about the structure. Structure is really important for any kind of onboarding for people to feel safe and that that you're and welcome. But really important also when you're going to be at your house and between meetings, you're actually just going to be by yourself. And so how do you structure things? Well, understand that new hires feel extremely untethered in the best of times, meaning they're kind of standing around, trying to look busy, trying to look like they've got things to do, but you have this feeling of like uselessness and that you're like a burden to other people because anytime you say, hey, is there anything I can do? You're making work for other people. When you're in a remote situation, you aren't going to be asking people, is there anything I can do for help? You're just going to be sitting alone doing nothing. And so really important to look at the next level, safe and secure. You've got your tools, you've got your stuff, everything's okay. The next version is is the structure piece. I want a lot of structure. And so what we found when we asked our newbies, they said, I love the checklists. I loved having everything itemized. They said there was a great balance of onboarding, going at your own pace, and assignments. So the idea was that you had meetings sprinkled in, so you saw yourself as having some busyness, but on the checklist, they had things you had to get done in that week. So you felt like this sense of accomplishment as you went through the process of meeting everyone and also doing your own self-learning tasks at your own pace. And we also send a lot of spreadsheets. We send articles, videos, everything we can about the company so that in those times that you don't have anybody to talk to, you have a list of things that you have to get done. It makes you feel like you've got this connection to the company, which is, what I'm going to say here is really old school. So we use old school checklists, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean, like you might have a wonderful system from technology that does an onboarding ramp up. That's amazing. If you don't have access to that, I'm just saying sending people a list of things that they have to do, Let them learn at their own pace, because it is exhausting at the beginning, but it's better to have more to do than less. So over-index on a lot of things, but you can be flexible with when it has to get done. A lot of people will gobble it up in that first week, and some people will take a little bit longer. Allow people to track progress with, this is how long this should take, this is when it should be done. And then finally, any kind of resources. If you have old presentations from company meetings, recordings of town halls, any kind of messages that will help them feel like they're getting caught up really quickly on what's been going on in the last maybe 3 months of the company, and even the last 3 to 6 months of their department. So, don't be ashamed. I used to do this thing where I would have this folder that I would create, and I would dump in everything that they would have known had they been here for about 3 months. And then I would send them that folder, and I'd say, just snoop around when you have time, just snoop around in there. And when we talk, just tell me what you saw. So I gave them a lot of pieces for snooping, because that makes you feel connected. And if you're in situational leadership, or you understand that model, even if you don't, the point is that when you're new, D1, meaning that you don't have a lot of competence, but you're really feeling excited, this kind of structure is super important to people. And why I bring it up is that we often think structure and checklists are for people with no experience or who have no transferable skills. When in fact, even if you're a highly skilled person, you're new to this business and you're new to this industry, you're new to this company's culture. And so I feel that it's super important, even if you're at an executive level of onboarding, to have a very prescriptive first couple of weeks. It's not insulting. In fact, it makes people feel safe. So I've just grabbed a couple of shots of the many, many things. We have what day they're on, how long it takes, who's going to talk to you about it, the link to the document. And this, again, by getting this before you start, really makes you feel like I'm going to be okay in this company. This is another version of our HR ramp-up plan. The first one was your job wrap-up plan. And then we also send a connection of a ton of our video resources and information about the company, so you get yourself up to speed really quickly. So again, and then my last thing was the folder from your leader, full of like interesting things that the company has done or that you've done, or projects that you're working on, so people can feel like they can get really quick into that. I'm seeing the chat, there's lots of questions. I'm very excited. We're going to get there. The other thing is, I think is something really great to differentiate whatever tool you use, is make sure you check in regularly. We check in once a week. So once a week, you get an exchange that says, how's your first week? How's your second week? How's your third week going? We send it out to the new people. And this is because you can't find them looking a little bit lost, or have them at their desk looking like they're a little bit stressed. We can't see you to know how you're doing. And if you say to people, hey, if you need anything, reach out, that assumes a lot of security and confidence with people who don't have connections yet. Most people don't want to be a bother. So I can tell you one thing, that no news is not good news when it's a new hire. If you haven't heard from them and they're not connecting with you, chances are it's not a good sign. We also have this kind of questions, survey questions, which I'm sure you can ask with any kind of tool, which is, how are you doing? And this is every week the same questions. I have a clear understanding of my tasks. I have a good idea what I need to do my job. I understand my role. In week 1, hopefully people are going to say, maybe I'm okay or just getting there. By week 4, we should be seeing, with these same questions, people increasing in their confidence and competence around their roles, so that we can say, confidently, after 4 weeks, people are feeling really good. And if you see a trend that people are not feeling great, the exchange often gives you the reason why. And we use this to continuously tweak our onboarding. So we actually start to move up the pyramid. So if you're a big fan of Maslow, everybody knows me, I bring it up every time, huge fan, is that you can't ask people to be thinking at the higher level in the pyramid until you address the lower levels. You got to earn your way up to people worrying about customers and quality and productivity and effectiveness and innovation. They're not going to do that when they're down here freaking out about not having their computers or worrying about why they have nothing to do today. So doing this by having that safety of having the tools the first day, structure of overly structuring things and not being shy to structure no matter what the level. And then this third level, which is the people and connections, start to form because the person's feeling really good and safe about themselves right now. So we're on to the next section, which is communication. Communication is so important when you are remote. I got a comment, I don't know, a few weeks ago about we don't want to overwhelm people. And I'm like, I totally get not wanting to overwhelm and the feeling of introverts versus extroverts, but I'm going to tell you, when you're new in an organization and don't feel like you have a lot of bonds with people, all you can do is build them through connection. So communication, well, I often think of hiring people like getting in a relationship with somebody. So I don't know if you know the last time you had a relationship with somebody, a significant other, how important it is. People want to call every day, they're texting all the time. And if there's like nobody answering the text, they're like, oh my God, I think the relationship's over. If it's like those three bubbles, but then there's no answer, you're like, what did I do wrong? That's how people feel at work when they're in a void. They're waiting for a ton of communication. So I'm just gonna give you a second to read this. I think this is just really beautifully said. Give you a second to read that on your own. So if you think about the relationship you're having with your new hire as an organization, as a team, and as a leader, understand that by talking to people, they can then express to you what they need. Don't say to them, if you need anything, let me know. You have to instigate that communication so the person feels like they're not being a bother, and understand that this helps that connection grow. So all I can say is over communicate, meaning having a way to check in every day and even with different people at different times throughout the week to make sure the person is feeling connected to you. So here's some of the thoughts we got in our exchange from our newbies. A welcome Zoom call with other new hires was great to start my first day remotely. So if at all you have a couple of new people starting at the same time, we actually introduce them as much as we introduce you to your team. You're introduced to other people who are in the same state as you. There's a ton of evidence that the similarity of people makes connections. And so even just having the similarity be you're both starting this week, we put you together so that you feel like you've got a cohort of new people, and those people often end up having really good connections as they grow in the organization. And we also have check-ins with the manager. So we have a check-in with your manager regularly, and every 2 weeks we have a check-in with HR, and we have a buddy program. So this is like kind of trying to get you at all points. You're meeting with your leader, you're meeting with your buddy, you're meeting with HR, you have a welcome call with new hires. So we're sort of creating this community by offering all these different groups of people for you. Over time, people will figure out who their community is, but we're not limiting it just to one person. See, there's a hand raised. I will come there in a moment. This is like when you're managing tech. I'll ask Amelia just to let me know if I need that. And then here's something I thought I would add just for to prompt me. It says, everyone who taught their sessions were super engaged and clearly loved Thoughtexchange. I put that in there because sometimes we're not as thoughtful about who we put in front of new people. So you might have a subject matter expert, but the way they're going to express their love of the organization may not be so great. And people are really in that thin slicing moment, vulnerable and open to a lot of information. So I had a role, didn't last long, I'll be honest. And the first interaction I had was with somebody who went through the org chart highlighting all the toxic people I should avoid, people who are going to like try to take me down or undermine me or whatever craziness there was. And I remember reading that first day, and I'm not going to kid, I was like shaking. I was like, what have I done? What kind of company is this? And I did not stay there very long. And so I think, again, put a lot of thought to who you put in front of new people so that they have a really positive experience of the organization right there. It's also important to announce it to the company, which I know everybody does that. We do this in Slack. And the announcements are pretty they're waiting to the person's first day. And what we do in our announcements is we write a little blurb about the person. And if you at them, it means that when they see Slack, they'll see that they got a note. And then if you see what everybody else does down here, is they then put little emoticons, so you see that, but they all answer it, putting the person's name. So you get this like love bomb. It's like, bang, bang, you're getting chirp and chirp and chirp that there's a note for you, a note for you. And it's a welcome from all these people saying, amazing, amazing. And this requires your whole company to take an interest in this. So we have a channel specifically about people that's required reading for the whole company. And when you see someone starts, you're encouraged to send them a quick note so they get a lot of messages. It's just kind of like feeling like you're special. And I have to tell you, having had it happen to me, it's a really amazing experience if you can do something like that, either through Teams or through Slack or through whatever intranet you have, is love bomb your people with personal notes when they first start. The other thing we do is we have a company meeting every 2 weeks. Actually, we're doing it every week now, but every 2 weeks, and we introduce them with screens on. So you get to see them and they get to see everybody else. So they get their first Zoom call at the beginning, they get their donut date, they get their all these little perks, and then they get their love bomb, and then they get to meet and be introduced. So there's a lot of time for people to feel like they got attention in those first weeks. And it does allow everybody who's busy to remember to say hello to new people. So we're getting to the inclusion section, and I want to make sure I leave time for all the questions as well. The inclusion section is sort of the result of everything I just said, because inclusion is feeling like you belong. And so, you know, my funny thing about inclusion strategies is like, just include people. And what does that mean is that you're really integrating them. And what you want to do when someone's remote is fast track that integration, because we can't take advantage of lunches or coffee breaks or those kinds of things. Inclusion has to be a set of certain behaviors that you're doing that result in the person feeling like they belong to something and that they're not a tourist, but they actually live there. So one of the big things about, you know, work enjoyment is feeling like you got a gang and you've got the scoop. Like, you know, like you got like the real scoop on the organization. And you can't get that as easily when you're remote because you're sitting on camera, you're chatting with people on chats. And if you have like a question is like, how did things really work here? Who's there to tell you what that is? Remember one of my experiences in my last role as a Cineplex is that I got caught in the stairwell because you didn't need a key to get into the stairwell, but you needed your pass to get out of the floor. And I remember being late for a meeting and sitting in the stairwell trying to get the door and banging on it and sweating and freaking out and feeling like I must be the dumbest person in this entire company not to know that I needed a pass to get out of the stairwell. And so who's there to teach you that kind of stuff? Well, what we do is to send this to you before you start. It's a collection of advice. We ask people, what advice would you give to new colleagues to help them have a great start here? And we send that out right away. And then you get like a bunch of scoops from people. So here's like, I just grabbed a screenshot of what these scoops are. And it says, be curious, there's a lot to learn. Everyone's busy, but we have huge hearts. Please feel free to call out. It says, hey, when people offer help, take it. And then I love this one down here at the bottom. It says, structure changes frequently. Don't panic if you move teams or change bosses. It's to be expected. Just so you know, so true. We change structure all the time. But it's a great kind of little scoop to give somebody, which is like, don't fall in love with the team or structure or boss you have because we mix it up frequently. And you're like, oh, that's good to know. Probably would have taken me a while to find that out. So we send them this report. And if you noticed in one of my earlier slides, it said one of the things the person loved was the advice exchange. And before they started, they kind of got all this great advice that would have taken them a long time because they would have had to make friends, which takes a long time. Getting there. We also use donut dates. This is with Slack. So it matches people up and it invites you to meet them. So what we do is new people are put in there and we encourage our people who've been around a long time to stay as well. And it just books a 30-minute meeting where you meet people and you talk to people and you just keep rotating it. And this is a really great feature if, you know, there's a lot of systems that do this kind of thing, but it's also important that you keep leaders in there and you keep people who've seasoned in there so that we get a good mix of people. And this is something that we also post in Slack, our donut dates. So it's another fun thing to do. And we have groups. So there's employee resource groups that are sort of this formal thing of like, meet this group, and this is a group of interested people. In Slack, what we do is we have just a ton of different teams. They're almost all unlocked. Anybody can go in. And it's, again, really good if you don't have a lot to do. You can go snoop in Slack at the beginning. I don't know what's going on here. And what happens is that you see things. Here's a post I did. One of our Slack channels is called What Now? The Kids Are Home. That's been ever since the kids have come home. And people are posting ideas, things they're doing, struggles they're having. Here's me, I posted a site about you know, education. And then we have another one, which is really fun. It's called #Oops. And #Oops is screw ups that you did that you normally would be laughing and telling someone about. We post them. So here's somebody who posted a screenshot of her screen because she said, "Good morning, babe, I love you," to a client, and then said, "Oh shit, I'm sorry," which is actually super funny. And really one of the special things. So whenever I feel like, you know what, I wonder what's going on with people, I want to laugh, I go read #Oops, and it's so super funny to see all the mishaps and mess ups people have with video calls and emails to the wrong people. It's a really great way for people to feel connected and like they work with human beings. And inclusion is another area here that people gave us a big shout out for, which is I liked having a buddy. So that was a big thing. And we also send a little surprise bag. So the surprise bag is just like tchotchkes from your company, whether it's stickers, mugs, chocolate, socks, anything you have, old USB keys, you know, all that kind of stuff that's labeled. send a few things so that people can put on their desk like a mouse pad and a few things that feel like I actually work for a company, even though I'm not in an office. So that's a great thing of perks to send. And of course, any kinds of things in the company culture. Now, I'm going to probably blow your mind with this next one for us with inclusion. We have an open calendar policy, meaning that everybody's calendar is open for everybody to see. You can block it if you need to, but we have it. So I just grabbed, a few people's calendars and it populates with all the meetings they're at. This is something really different, which I was a little bit surprised when I first came to Thoughtexchange, but I love it. And this is the idea that we might not remember that you should be in a certain meeting or you'd be interested in a certain group or that your ideas would be helpful to this group. So we say, listen, if there's a meeting that you see going on that you think that you could participate or share, go in and look at what the meeting's about, in the invite, and you can message the person and say, hey, can I drop in on that meeting? And you're strongly encouraged to visit different team meetings so that you can get to know people. It's a level of transparency that a lot of organizations are not comfortable with. But I can say that when you're in an office, you see people hanging around outside of meeting rooms, going in and out of doors, and you get a sense of who's in and out of a meeting and what's going on. When you work at home, you really have no idea what anyone else is doing. And that can make it hard to feel connected and to feel like you're not scared a little bit about all the unknowns. So you've got to kind of strip away all of that layer of unknown for people so that they have a fast and easy way to access what's happening in your organization and to even see that even though my calendar right now is empty, there's a ton of cool stuff going on and I can join in. And I think that's great. And last thing I'm going to talk about is leaders, and then we're going to run an exchange and do a Q&A. So the leaders here is, when we're hiring a new leader, we often say to people, don't worry, you're going to love them. And that's really an oversimplification of a very complex relationship. I have a new boss who is in remote. I'm not going to meet them. They're not going to meet me. We're not going for coffee or drinks. We're not having a team meeting around a boardroom table. How do I connect with my team and how does my team connect with me? And so what we do is new leader exchanges. It's really popular. And I did one for myself here when I got to Thoughtexchange where I asked what's important for me to know about the team and our objectives so I can best support you in my new role. Just throw that out to everybody and say, what is it that you're expecting of me? And what is it that I should know? It's kind of like that advice piece, but because it's anonymous, people can feel like they can say things to you that might have taken them weeks or months to talk to you about, but you have to fast track that because I'm not going to get to meet you in person maybe for a year. So some of the things I got was like, it's important to meet everyone. So I was being told, go around and meet everybody in our teams. And guess how I did it? I opened that screen that shows all the meetings and just inserted myself to all the team meetings that I could and just said hello. So that's how I got to meet people. And then I got some advice that was like a little bit on the different side, like, hey, we have a lot of senior leaders. Don't keep your head in the clouds. I understand. I'm in Montreal. I'm alone in this province. I'm the only person who works for Thoughtexchange in Quebec. How am I going to connect to people and how are they going to feel that I really am their head of people? I've got to meet them and I've got to keep myself tethered to reality. And so not only did I get these important things, I got a theme of things. So I got a theme about meeting the team, understand agreement culture, support the sales team, all the way down to look at some compensation related things. And so this was really great for me to see because I could manage the expectations of the organization on me. And then I actually had a quick virtual event with the company where I debriefed all the expectations people had of me. I said, here's what you expect, and here's what I'm reasonably going to be able to do. And so we had this sort of wonderful back and forth exchange of managing expectations right at that very beginning, so that in that thin slicing moment where people are also assessing whether the leader is capable to do the job they were hired for, I can come out looking as competent and transparent as possible. And that's really important when you're a leader for a remote organization where you don't get that face-to-face time. So what does getting it right look like? It's my last slide before the exchange, which is great. And I showed this in the culture virtual event I did, and I'm showing it again because we have a lot of great comments on LinkedIn, and we also have a 5-star rating on Glassdoor. And I use this because the person who posted this is one of the newbies, February 10th, 2020. And one of the things they say here is that as a company with everybody working remotely, Thoughtexchange has collaboration down to an art. And so it's talking about all the efforts to bring people together as a community. So this is an example of how we intentionally did all those pieces and it results in this feedback. And even the cons, which is remote work can be isolating, but there are a lot of resources to feel connected. And this is an employee out of Toronto when most of our employee base is in the West Coast. And then, of course, we see lots of wonderful comments. Now, my view is back to the Gladwell slide, thin slicing. We wouldn't get comments like this if your first couple of weeks weren't good. It's really hard to rebuild trust and have people rethink an impression they had of you. So I believe the majority of this amazing love comes because we get those first few weeks right. So without further ado, we are going to have an exchange and some Q&A, and it's going to get wild and crazy. So I'm inviting you now back into share thoughts, ideas. You might not have questions. You might actually have a great idea for this community who's on this exchange, and I would love to hear that too. So if you have a thought, an idea, something you're doing in your company, put it in the exchange. And if you have a question, do that as well. And while I leave this up, I can go and look in the chat and see if there's anything I have to answer. So I am going to give you, I'm going to start the timer. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes again to go into this exchange. So I'm going to do a couple things here as you're finishing this up. One is that I usually like to leave the last 5 minutes to have people come off mute, either with their camera on or off if they want to chat, because I do like to have some human connection. And I'd also like to let you know that we are trying something new Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern. We're going to send a link to you tomorrow with the update from today's session, as well as if we can in the chat. I'm not 100% sure. Where we're going to do a sort of we're going to hack or break the traditional mold of these sessions and do a community sharing discussion, meaning that people will have their cameras on, they'll be off mute, and I'm just going to be leading a discussion on whatever topics that we feel are important to talk about as leaders today. So it'll start with an exchange of what do we think we should be talking about, and we're just going to put us in small group discussions. We're going to actually have like an interactive discussion with like-minded people. So I know the paradigm right now in virtual events is that you're sitting quietly silent with like your mouth covered in tape and I'm talking to a void. And one of the things we feel is really missing right now in all of this wonderful online content is interaction and community. And so this is going to be like a Brady Bunch screen thing where everybody's talking, and I'm going to facilitate some discussions on some, hot topics, some interesting things that are going to come out in our exchanges. And you'll be talking and sharing ideas and stories. And so I encourage you, if you want to try something like that, where you're an active participant in the content, to join us Monday at 2, and hopefully these will work well and we'll do them regularly. So let's do a refresh here and make sure that we're getting to the questions that people have today. So first one, thanks you everybody for participating. Can't assume if you hear nothing negative from remote employees that everything is okay. That's exactly it. Asking people who are so vulnerable on that Maslow hierarchy there at the bottom in terms of safety and security to voice their dissatisfaction with the company likely is career suicide. So you probably shouldn't be doing that. So you want to make sure you do it in an anonymous and safe way, and that you're constantly asking for that advice and not waiting for it. Yes, getting it right the first time. How can we use Thoughtexchange to connect current teams working remotely? So that's a great point. If you definitely, I'd say LinkedIn or Amelia, if you can drop my email into the chat. Thoughtexchange is easy. You can launch it from your phone, and depending on what kind of license you have, you can just throw an exchange out to anyone, to your team, to your peers. At Thoughtexchange, every person runs what we call their newbie exchange, which is they run an exchange with a company to engage with them. And we require that as part of your onboarding. So people will ask anything from, life advice to Netflix advice to advice about, certain aspects of the organization. And so we definitely can do that. Janet, you're asking about pricing. It actually varies. So what I would say is message me and I can get you all the information you need. We're also currently offering free exchanges for COVID related. So if you want to try the tool out and get the vibe and feeling of it, we have a program right now where you can run up to 3 exchanges around COVID and how your company's handling it and handling remote work. And I would encourage you to do that so that you can try the tool. Okay, Amelia's going to post the link. So anybody who can come to LinkedIn, you email me right into the exchange here. I'll be happy to talk to you about pricing and even about how it works inside organizations. I was a client prior, just so anybody who doesn't know. Thoughtexchange was one of the tools I used as an HR leader. And then last year I made the leap to come work for Thoughtexchange. How do you facilitate your virtual new employee onboarding session? Are they pre-recorded or live, and how long do they run? So this is an interesting one. What platform do we use? We use Zoom, which we're using right now. And we use that. So everybody at Thoughtexchange has a Zoom account, and we run our onboarding sessions that way. There's a mix between leader-led and self-taught. So we have a little bit of everything going at the same time. It wouldn't be possible to have 100% leader-led. So we do have a mix. So it's a mix between the HR kind of company culture piece, working with your direct leader, working with your team, and also working with, if you're in like sales, the sales team or the service team. So it's really a blended approach, and it goes on for about 4 weeks in our onboarding process. Love that your company has targeted connections, which is great. What advice can you provide for getting leadership to see the importance in having a plan for the new hires in the first weeks? We have leaders that continue to disregard the resources provided. I get it, which leads to some harm. You know, it's a really interesting point. In fact, I saw this one pop up and it's been on my mind for the last few minutes, which is that leaders not really understanding fundamentally that their role is to care for others. That's what your job is. So when somebody tells me, you know, I'd love to get us, you know, I'd love to have people report to me. I'm like, they're going to be in your care, which means that you have to think about them, plan for them, be aware of them. And it's not for everybody. So I did have one situation where somebody said to me, you know what, I'm just not like touchy-feely like that. It's just not who I am. Like this stuff is okay, but it's really just not for me. I'm just not that kind of leader. And I was like, all right, then you're not a leader, because really, if you don't make good connections with your people, they are not going to be as productive and effective in their role. And if you had a piece of machinery, let's say it was a computer, and it needed to be, you know, 72 degrees in order to, or, you know, 21 Celsius in order to function at its maximum potential. That's how the temperature it needed. And you decided to just keep your room at 60 degrees or at like 15. And so the computer did not run at its full potential just because you didn't feel like giving it the right temperature. That would be unacceptable, because that piece of machinery isn't functioning properly. Well, a human being functions properly when they have a really good onboarding experience that's structured. So if you're like, I'm going to opt out of that, you're really opting out of getting the maximum out of this really important resource. So I really worked with people to understand that this isn't a suggestion. This is an expectation of being a leader, and it's part of the responsibility you have when people report to you. So that's my little lecture on that. And if this is your thought and you want some advice on that conversation, or you have a really prickly person who has, you know, been left in the last millennia of bosses, I would love to talk to you about that. It's a great conversation, so do reach out if you want to. I love replacing Ask Me Anything session with something like this where it's anonymous. Yes, you know, chats and all these things that are not anonymous, people who are new have a real need to sort of market themselves and sort of show their best self. Like, I have no needs, I'm super happy, I'm super positive, you know, give me a cape and I'll jump off a building. And people who don't act like that, everybody says, oof, there's a little bit, that person's got a big chip on their shoulder and a lot of baggage. So we actually do sort of perpetuate the idea that new people should be happy, enthusiastic, and excited about everything. And people who are not, perhaps, were a mistake. And so by using an anonymous tool, you take away the name from it. And especially if all the other new people you've hired in the last year are agreeing that this is a concern around the company's onboarding or culture, you can then address it in a way that's, that doesn't attack anybody personally. Just going to do a quick thing here, just so you know, because this was live. There might be some new ones floating to the top. I think we're doing well. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of more, and then I'm going to see if anybody wants to get off the chat and chat, or we can end a couple minutes early. So much has been shared already. Should just be a way of doing things, not just for newbies. Yes, you're totally right. I believe that you know, my funny thing about what's going on in the world now is people are like, how do we connect remotely? How do we have engaging meetings where people are not multitasking? And my thing is like, you should have been running good meetings all the time. I don't know why suddenly you're worried about having a good meeting now when you were okay having terrible meetings for the last 25 years. So it is an interesting thing here. Well, yes, a lot of what we're talking about is good about onboarding in general. And I firmly agree that, you know, when you do the virtual thing, it just sort of puts it on steroids. Like, everything that's not good about your onboarding experience is going to be blown up tenfold when people don't have any day-to-day interaction. So it's, you know, what you may have been able to skirt by, like not having your computer for a week. You could somehow sort of figure out a way to message that. You can't message it when it's virtual. How do you capture water cooler talk between senior leaders? Yeah, this is great. Like, how do you get introduced to someone senior? And I know that even in companies where it's live, there's breakfast, there's way to meet with senior people. I think one of the really interesting, important things that we try to work on in Thoughtexchange is encouraging people to attend meetings and get introduced. But there's even a bigger piece here. We're a small organization, so leaders can still reach out directly to new people and be part of that donut date thing. Like I do donut dates, meaning that I'm popped and matched with people regularly. Is do the kind of thing we did with our newbie exchange, which is ask leaders, even if it's a series of videos, to record themselves. And it just takes 2 seconds. You get like a tripod from Amazon for 20 bucks. You put your phone on it and record a welcome message, a story about yourself, interesting anecdote, something that would take a long time to hear it, and welcome them with that message from the leader. So I think that you can either have the leader pop into that newbie first day Zoom meeting and talk about them, but also sharing stories that are intimate and interesting, that humanize the experience is a really important piece. So I would say that I would encourage senior leaders to regularly do those sort of recordings. How do you get hiring managers to buy into committing all to these meetings with a new hire that they wouldn't normally do if they were in the office? Yeah, hiring managers, it's an interesting thing because there's 2 kinds of hiring managers. There's the hiring manager where you're the expert technically and you're technically onboarding somebody. Then there's a manager that's hired a specialist that's really this sort of strategic leader, but that person is not being taught by them. So what you want to really do with a leader is say that your check-ins are to listen. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Is there anything you need from me? And that's really a great active listening, a great sort of coach leader versus technical leader. So if there's really nothing technical I can offer you, I hired somebody recently who's doing sales enablement. I've never done that. And so my conversation with this person is not about here's how to do your job, because I hired somebody who knows how to do the job. It's how are you doing? How is the connections going? How are the interactions? How are your relationships? And I'm really there as a sounding board and a guide in their journey to making connections and finding the right people to get their job done. And I think when you tell a leader that you don't have to prepare for these calls, the only thing you have to do is show up. Show up and ask a question and listen. And your job is to clear away obstacles and to clear away confusion. And I think leaders often think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do tons of technical work. But when you say that it's really just having some deep conversations and listening, most leaders will step into that. I'm just doing a quick time check. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to do about 2 more. I love connected to 30, 60, 90-day plans. Exactly. Yes, you want to have plans for people that run, even to 120 days. I'm only saying that because really, I think onboarding is a year, to be honest. I think you need to anniversary yourself before you're really, really good at something. But there's a lot of checkpoints in those first few months that will be key to your success. And telling to somebody after 30 or 60 days, you're live now, that's okay, but they're really not fully live until they've seen the full cycle of the organization. So having a lot of those checkpoints are important. Yeah, do you like the hashtag oops? I have to tell you, there's so many funny things in hashtag oops of people doing funny stuff. And I think it's great, especially if all levels of the organization contribute their mistakes. We even have an award that we just gave at our last company meeting to the person who posted the most oopses, because they're so fun for everybody else. Last one. How would I use this tool if I'm only hiring one person? There wouldn't be a cohort. So what we do is we actually have exchanges that are open for a long time. So you can have them open for an hour, you can have them open for like 5 months if you feel like it doesn't matter. And so it's interesting to keep it open so that once, we ask usually a small group to go in at the beginning and load it with enough thoughts so that people don't feel like, oh, I'm the only one in here. And then when you have about 15 thoughts, it can grow. So people can go in and add their thought and rate the thoughts of others, and over time it gets bigger. But we are not a large organization, and we are managed to do it by keeping certain exchanges open for a longer period of time. Here it is, last one. We want to have new hires meet each other and build connections. There needs to be a structure around to keep this. What do you suggest? So the structure that we actually work with right now is a few things. We do a buddy system, and we do have the donut dates. When you're talking about how to have them build connections, we also do other virtual non-work related things. So we have a social event, we have after work events right now, especially during social isolation, we actually have a daily connection where people can eat lunch for a half an hour together at the same time. It's on everyone's calendar. It's populated. You don't have to accept it. You can just show up. And we also have a meditation you can go to every day. And so we just have these things that are in everyone's calendar every day that you can click into so that you don't have to invent reasons for yourself and ask people to go to things. I think that's really, really hard when you're new, is to ask somebody to talk to you. So we actually just insert them in everybody's calendar. And even though you might not go to them, it's fun to see that they're happening and that there's always a few people involved. So with that, if there's any questions that people want to pop or ask, come off the chat and to talk to me personally. I will send out the link. I think this is going to come out tomorrow. Amelia's going to send it out. I will try to answer some of these. If I don't get a chance to, it might not be until next week. But they're really great comments and questions. And I'm very, very grateful for what your participation levels were today. So if there's anybody who wants to talk, I'm going to spend the next few minutes sitting here. And if you've got to pop off, have an amazing day and take care. So anybody have a question or a chat, I'm here to answer. Oh, yes. Thank you, Amelia. If you want to register for our discussion that we're going to have on Monday, it would be great just to meet you and to talk to you. And if you want to know more about Suddenly Remote, I'm doing them every 2 weeks. This is a series. It's my 4th installment. I'm going to do one in 2 weeks about online training. And if you want to hear any of the other ones about meetings, culture, or leading in crisis, we can send you the recordings of those as well. So please do come back. Love talking to you, and take care.